the whole point of this came from a cardiologist 30, 40 years ago who was noticing that a bunch of folks were having heart attacks, and they all seemed to be of the same type. He said, they seem to be sort of personality type. There's other people in his practice who were not having those heart attacks. And he was like, what's the deal with this? So he started thinking about why there was a psychological difference between people who were having heart attacks and not. And he came up with this basic notion of type A and type B. And the type A people are the very wound up, highly energetic, highly motivated, aggressive, competitive types. Typically the ones who you would think of are really the go-getters in business. And then the type Bs were the more relaxed, not so concerned about things. They were sort of life will happen, life will be fine. Type A personalities are pretty much the ones that everyone hires for, right? So if you're going into, particularly in product management, if you're going into an interview, they're looking for the go-getter. I can guarantee that there's the vast majority of ones are going to look for the people who are looking to move up, looking to be aggressive. They're going to do a lot of work. They're going to work hard and fast. They're not looking for the type B, the sort of relaxed, easygoing. In this industry, in the tech industry, there are other industries that are different. But in type B, in the tech industry, type B is that's not the dominant one. So it's a spectrum, right? I mean, the reality is nobody is pure. Well, I don't know. Maybe Steve Jobs may have been a purely type A. There are other people who may be purely type B. For the most part, everybody's sort of a mix. I am certainly a mix, but I heavily lean towards the type B. So the point of this talk was, okay, well, what does it mean to be successful as a type B personality in a business that does not really want type Bs? And so part of that we have to do is we have to define what success means. So let's talk a little bit first about my background and how I got here. So I started at Microsoft in '92. Was there for about 14 years. Went from Microsoft, went to a startup for about a year. It went back to Microsoft, realized why I had left in the first place. Went to Real Networks for about 5 years, was there for about 5, Expedia for 3, and then I've been at Best Buy for about 5. So I've been at a few different size companies. So, and actually my very first job out of college in 1990 was at Max Place, which was a software mail order company. At the time you would call, this was before the internet, you would call us on the phone to order your computer parts. And Max Place got absorbed by PC Connection, which I think still exists. I'm not entirely sure. But this is back in the day when they sent you physical paper catalogs. So I'm that old. But so Microsoft was one of the places where, particularly in the 90s, it was the roaring 90s, it was go, go, go. It was the beginning of the internet. And this notion of type A and type B was really important because you had to be focused on your career. They were very interested in you being focused on your career. They were not interested in people who just wanted to work. And it was for me, now I was in my 20s at that point, it was an interesting thing to try and work out, well, okay, what does success mean then? Does success mean that I'm moving up in the ranks? Because they had very much sort of, there was, for a while there was a rank and yank, right? So you would be stack ranked and then the people who were at the bottom of the stack got yanked. Not a pleasant system. And so I had to think about, well, okay, what does success mean for me? Is it moving up? Is it getting more skills? Is it more control? Is it just making money? I mean, this was the 90s, a lot of money washing around Microsoft. And for me, the success is much more about work-life balance. So I am not the type A. I don't care if I become vice president. I don't care if I have broad industry impact. I like doing my job. I like doing it well. But I don't aspire to be the next Steve Jobs or any, it's not an issue for me around, am I going to be the big thing? So this is in direct conflict with a lot of what the folks will tell you. So you're going to get into companies like that where that will be a message they don't want to hear. So I'll tell you a story about Windows. So at one point I was working on Windows, on the Windows shell on XP. Windows shell means the UI that you see, the start menu. I was actually doing the start menu was my piece. And I had this discussion with my boss at the time, and I said, I don't want to work 12 hours a day. That sucks. I have other things that I like to do. I'm a musician. I'm a pilot. This is not my thing, and I want to be able to sort of set my goal, my workload to be calibrated with my goal, my view of success, and my view of what is adequate. He was like, yeah, it's totally cool with that. Turns out his boss was not. So you end up with this interesting problem of conflicting notions of what is successful. And so one of the things that I think is sort of an important part to start with is being honest with yourself about what you view as success, because you will be told it is not success. You will have a lot of people who will say, that's not success, and that's not something that we want here. You have to be able to know yourself what you want. Now, as you're younger, this will be harder to know. You'll have to sort of say, maybe I'm going to have to develop for a while, not really sure if I've got this worked out. As you get older, it will become clear, particularly as you have families, and let me tell you, kids will immediately change your view of what success is. Having that definition in your head, though, is going to be important as we talk through some of this as to how you will be successful within that environment. I personally, like I said, I'm on the type B. I'm sort of on the creative weird side of the spectrum. That in my early years manifested itself in a number of ways. And so one of the points that I'm going to share with you here are some of my mistakes. Learn from my mistakes. Has anyone seen the demotivator posters? Does that ring a bell with anyone? Got one. There's a company who makes posters that are not motivational posters, they're demotivational posters. And one of them is a picture of the Titanic, well, a boat with just the tail sticking out of the water, and it says, it's possible that your purpose in life is simply to serve as a warning to others. It is demotivating. I use this somewhat more broadly, is to take my mistakes as a warning. Learn from my mistakes. Don't make my mistakes. One of them was early on, with this sort of weirdness of my personality, I would send out emails. This was mid-90s when I was working on Cinemania, which was a CD-ROM product for movies. And I would send out emails to try, and you know, everybody sends out 1 million emails a day, and you get 1 million emails a day, and you don't want to read them. You have to get through all of them. People skip them, they ignore them, they don't do them. It's a real pain. So I would write these emails like E.E. Cummings, which was a poet from many years ago, who would write poetry in these sort of weird structures. The words would be sort of strung out on the page and then wrapped around themselves, and you know, imagine email art, essentially. But I was getting my message across through this. And I mean, it wasn't fully E.E. Cummings style, but it was weird enough that the people who were in the group who supported me were like, this is great, we love this, this is so much fun, you're a stitch. And it would move up maybe 3 levels to a vice president who would say, I can't read this, why are you wasting your time with this funny artistic crap? Don't do that. Pound, pound, pound. There is a degree, again, to that notion of being honest with yourself about what you want and what you feel is successful and what is important to you, to where you have to be able to calibrate that against what the organization will tolerate. Found out the hard way with the E. Cummings. They're not going to tolerate the funny emails in that particular organization. Some will, some won't. There is that exploration that you end up trying to do, touching the stove, as it were. How hot is it? Oh, that's pretty hot. I'm not going to touch that again. Similar sort of thing in, for example, technical ability. Being honest with yourself about what is your ability and how you represent it to others. So when I was in MSN, it was a very technical, this was when search was just beginning. This was what turned into Bing, which is now Bing. And it was a very technical group, and I was trying to survive as a product manager. At that time, we called them program managers. Product managers were a marketing person, so it was a different thing, different definition at that point. So I was trying to survive in that, and I was trying to fake it till you make it. I'll tell you something. If you're in a technical organization and you're trying to fake it until you make it, you better be really good at faking it, because they're going to figure it out. And that survival technique did not work. So, I mean, I stayed in the group, but I had my fair share of uncomfortable conversations with people where it was very clear I didn't know what the hell I was talking about. Right? We would be talking about some deep technical system that somebody who, a developer really understood well, and that I, as a product manager, didn't have the background. I'm an English major, okay? I learned BASIC and Pascal and a number of programming languages back in the 80s, teaching myself on TRS-80 color computers and Sinclair ZX81s. But I was not highly technical. So I found myself trying to swim in with these other very technical people and represent myself as something on the whole, maybe if I keep faking it, I'll get there to where I'll actually understand what the hell they're talking about. Doesn't work. So again, that notion of trying to be the type B and I'm just going to sort of be myself and hope that I can work my way in sort of through the side, it doesn't work. So there is this question of being honest with yourself and then being honest with others and communicating clearly where you're at. So I mean, one of the things that I think is important as we talk about getting into jobs is understanding that honesty is going to have to come out at some point. If you don't do it at the beginning, it's going to come out later. And if you're not clear with yourself, it's going to be clear to everyone else. They're going to see it. So don't think that you can represent yourself as something that you're not. It'll bite you later. So assuming that you've done an honest assessment of yourself and you to yourself, okay, I'm not the type A, 12-hour a day, just don't want to do anything else but this type. Maybe I've got other things I want to do. I'm perhaps more relaxed. I'm not so neurotic about work. How then do you get into the positions that you want that are going to be successful over time and at the same time fulfilling for you, where you're not in a battle with people who think that you are something you're not? You do that assessment. You think to yourself, how much of this is about money? Are you here to make a bunch of money? Perfectly valid thing. But it's going to be harder to do because the people who get paid a lot of money tend to be the type A's. Are you there for notoriety? You want to have broad industry impact. You want to have broad control over a particular area, a particular product, or within a given company. You want to be someone who is looked up to as the expert. The more money you want, the more control you want, the more vulnerable you're going to be. So one of the lessons I learned the hard way was, you're going to get yourself pushed into jobs that you don't necessarily fit and that you don't necessarily want and that the other people who are in there don't necessarily want you in, because you're representing yourself in such a way that I need this job. This is going to lead me to this thing and that'll lead me to that thing. You think there's a ladder, but now you're vulnerable because now the money that you've got yourself hooked into, you said, I want to make 100 grand a year. Actually now in Seattle, it's just to live here. I think they estimated 130,000 a year just to live in Seattle. I want to make basic Seattle wages. I want to make 130 grand a year. I'm not willing to live in the suburbs or something like that. You're now stuck, that needle is now stuck in your vein. And you're thinking to yourself, but I need that money. I need to get to that job. My personal experience is find a way, and my advice would be, find a way to accept less. Find a way to work for less to begin with. Find that you're less addicted to the money or the control or any of those things until you understand what you really like. Because you're going to get into a job, let's say, for example, there are product management jobs that are very technical and let's say it's back-end server work. You're a product manager on Amazon AWS. You're working on back-end server features. Let's imagine that this is an operational job. So servers have to be up all the time. It's 5 nines. Actually, I think they go for like 6 nines or something like that. You're trying to make yourself into something that is, you're getting for a job that is going to be very much antithetical to your personality. So Amazon frontline operational job at something like AWS is going to require people who are high energy, on it all the time, very focused on the technical details, and constantly staying with it. They're constantly rotating. They've got a very, they're turning very quick to make sure that that's always on their mind. It's not a relaxing sort of job. If you're a type B personality, that's probably not the job for you. So if you go and you think, but that's what's available that's going to pay me 150 grand a year, and you get yourself into it, you're not going to be happy. And ultimately, your happiness will come through. So I can tell you as a hiring manager, I'm going to look at those folks, I'm going to say, yeah, why is he bummed out all the time? He's not having fun, he's grumpy, other people interact with him and it's unpleasant. It's because this person is in a job that they don't like. That's a fairly broad problem across the industry. Lots of people in jobs they don't like. They're in jobs they don't like because they're trying to go for money they can't get elsewhere. So you got to think about, is that worth it? Try to, the mistake I made early on was I was in Microsoft at a time when there was a lot of money around. I was like, well, boy, I should go for that. Don't go for that. Start with going for figuring out what is it you like doing. Take the job that pays less but is more interesting to you. Over time, you'll get better, you'll make more money, but you'll be in a track that makes more sense. People get in these tracks, and I've seen many, many folks like this. They get in a track and they're stuck on it because 10 years down the road, if you started, let's say, in a server product management position, you're doing back-end product management, and 10 years down the road, you now have a bunch of skills around server product management. Great, except you hate your life. Life sucks. This is not your thing. How are you going to shift? And then you have to make this giant shift because all of your skills are aligned over in this pile. It turns out all the stuff that you really needed to learn was over here, but you jumped for the money too early. It's just fair warning. It was a mistake. Now I ended up being able to transfer. I got real lucky. I was able to move horizontally into a line into design and user interface design, which was much more in line with my personality. So maybe you get those opportunities, maybe you won't. I count my lucky stars on a regular basis that I was able to make that transference. And the people who I see coming in who don't make that choice early on, I feel bad for them because they're stuck. And I don't have a good way to move them other than to say, well, go to product school, go to something else, go learn the skills that you're going to need elsewhere. Go to design school if that's what you're into, go to coding if you want to be a developer. Figure those things out because you're going to have to get those skills elsewhere. We're not going to get them to you on the job. Hi. So step one, getting the job. We talked about researching yourself, doing an honest assessment. Part of it is researching the company. My experience has been that some companies simply aren't conducive. So you have to have a real clear mindset for yourself of what I want going to be something that this company is going to support. So if you're a type B personality, you're going to want that less aggressive, competitive culture. Is the company you're going into got that? Be honest about what's actually there. When you hear a given company has a reputation as being super aggressive, talk to some people in it, do some informationals. I have done any number of informationals with people who said, I just want to find out more about this company. I'm not looking to get a job with you. I don't know if you have any jobs. Can you just tell me more? Happy to do it. Let's go down, get a coffee, chat for a little bit. You can buy me the coffee. I will talk to you. We'll work for food. Right? It's not a bad thing, So you offer to buy somebody a donut, and you'll probably get 15 minutes of their time. Get them a donut and a coffee, maybe you get a half an hour, and you can get a lot of useful information. You got to do the research. You've got to know what you're getting into. Once you get to the company and start interviewing, you got to research the group itself. Look at the hiring manager. What's the vibe with them? Talk to them and interview them in particular about work-life balance. If the first thing when you talk about work-life balance, which is a big thing typically with type B folks, if the first thing they do is go, why do you ask? It's not a good sign. Probably an indication that that's not going to be a thing that they're going to have much interest in. Your chemistry with the hiring manager is going to be critical to your support over time. I've had folks who have hired me in who I was very honest with about sort of my balance and the things that I wanted to do outside of work and the time that I needed and the pace at which I was willing to work and the amount of overtime I was willing to do. And they were great and they supported me, and there are others who were like, yeah, that's not really going to work here. And in some cases I took the job anyway, which was a mistake. Because there were skills there I wanted, there were products I wanted to work on, and I just didn't quite have it together. I didn't quite understand just how miserable that can make you later on. Once I got into the places where I had a good manager and the manager supported me and their manager supported me, suddenly I'm much happier and I'm much more successful. I'm able to do my job more efficiently. I get along better with other people who are around me. We all work together as a team better. That notion of culture is important. Human resources departments will talk to you incessantly about it's not about fit. We hire based on skills. We don't talk about personality fit because it's not personality, because what they're afraid of is there will be discrimination. And we don't want to discriminate against anybody. Hiring is a process of discrimination. It shouldn't be in the bad sense, but it's in the good sense. Like, are you the right fit for this job? We're not going to hire in a Python developer for an interface design job, because they're not an interface designer. They're a Python developer. That's a very obvious level thing. But the cultural fit is one that is just as much there, but they try not to talk about it. They try not to talk about how you're going to fit in. And the only way you can get this is by actually talking to people and getting a feel for the things that are important to you. So go back to that assessment. If the thing that's important to you is not working very many hours, or it's having a lot of vacation time in large blocks because you like to travel, being upfront about that, you can't be afraid of asking people for that. If you ask for that and they seem to react negatively, there's your answer. So if that's important to you, be honest about it. Don't try to hide it. We're going to find out later. So I've hired a lot of people. I've hired 150 people. I don't know. Lots. And I will see it later. I will know that you didn't tell me the truth during the interviews. I will know that you were not the person for this job. And I will hire for different types of jobs. I will look specifically for type A people, even though I am not one, for jobs that I know require that kind of personality. Someone who's really hyped up and is really go, 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 go. And I will hire someone who is less that and who's type B for other jobs, typically for more design, creative, high-level thinking, where people will be more relaxed and can think out of the box and aren't so trapped by going, I have to get this done, and they look at the chain of events and they go, I have to get that and that and that and that, and they just go, right? That personality isn't going to work well for the creative design sort of thing. Likewise, the creative designer who likes to sort of daydream and think out of the box and think of new innovative ideas is not the person I want in an operational role. So I am looking for fit, and I am looking at personality, and I am going to discriminate based on what your personality seems like. So that representation of your personality and how you're going to fit is very important to look at and to be honest with yourself so that you're not misrepresenting yourself to the company when you get there. Otherwise, you're going to end up in a job that you don't particularly like. Now, let's imagine you do get a job you don't particularly like. Jump. At Microsoft, there was at one point a rule that if you had been in a role for more than 2 years, you were probably stagnating. It's kind of weird, but it was really a thing. Like, they sort of looked at you weird, like, you've been doing this for more than 2 years? Why haven't you switched? I'm like, well, I don't know, because I like it? I'm like, no. So understand that in many companies, there is both an expectation and even a demand that you move around. Doesn't happen in all companies, and it depends on the size of the company. Some place like Microsoft or Amazon is going to have a much more of a ability to do that, to make lateral moves, because they're so large, and you can go, well, okay, I'll move to this group, or I'll move to that group. Smaller companies, if you're in a startup, well, you're not moving anywhere because there's 6 of you in a garage someplace. Different situation. But be prepared to move. And there's no shame in that. I mean, I as a hiring manager look at that sometimes, and you look at a resume and you go, wow, they were there for 2 years, and there for 2 years, and were there for 1 year, and 2 years, and 3 years, and 1 year. And there's a couple of ways of looking at that. One is they suck, and nobody wants to keep them for very long, and they just get rid of them. 2, they're growing. They're going and they're learning things, and they're trying to find the place that is either best for them or that has the most opportunities for growth. And so you look for that pattern of, okay, what did you learn in each of these? And so the interview that I will typically be, I will ask them, well, what did you learn in each of these things? What do you take away from each of those jobs that you then, based on the next one, how did you then make that better? So jumping is not necessarily a bad thing, and you should view it as a viable tool, both for growing your skills, but also for getting to the right fit. Obviously, there are lots of parameters here around technical ability versus business ability. If you're if your background is in business analysis, for example, versus coding. But the fit thing is also real important. You have to think about that. So in terms of then, as you look at the way that you're moving around the groups, whether it's inside a company or between companies, interview the people who are interviewing you. The number of times people don't interview me when I am interviewing them, I don't understand. Like, you have this opportunity. You're coming and talking to me. I'm hiring for you for a job. You're interviewing for a job with me. And I will leave the last 15 minutes for the candidates to ask questions. And the number of times candidates come and say, they'll ask one or two very small questions about logistics or some small thing, and well, anything else? No, I think you've answered my questions. And I'm like, really? Interview me. You don't know anything about me other than maybe some sort of high-level discussion of what I do and where I come from. But understand how I view the company, how I view the role, how I view success. I mean, the best question you can ask is, what does success look like? Please define success in this role for me. How will I be measured? When I do my review, what's going to be on my review? What are the goals going to be? Ask me those questions, and I will tell you, and that will help you understand your fit. Because if the measure of success I come back with is, well, it's going to be how many of these things you were able to drive in a very short period of time, that's going to be a different thing versus, were you able to come up with new, interesting, creative ideas that the team was then able to act on? Right? Because one is very operational and tactical and speed, and one is much more imaginative and creative and slower. Interview me. Interview the people you're talking to. Interview all the people who interview you. If you come out of a given interview session without having spent, you should be walking out of the room asking them questions. Oh, and then what about, oh yeah, okay, and cool. All the way through. Take advantage of that time. It's hugely valuable. And it's also indicative for me as a hiring manager to say, okay, they actually are thinking about this. I'm looking also at fit. And if you're coming at this and saying, I don't really have any questions, I just want the job. Well, okay. I got 10 other people looking for the same job. I'm going to find the one who actually is interested, as opposed to the one who's just sort of here because it seems like a logical piece. Let's imagine now that we're past the finding a job. You've done a good analysis of yourself. You've honestly represented yourself to a hiring company. They've hired you. Life is good. Now you're working in the job. A few years down the road, you've maybe moved a group. The group itself has changed. They've reorged. How do I deal with those sets of changes that are happening? What happens when I am reorged into a new group? This happens a lot at large companies. You will just be physically moved. They'll just sort of uproot you and go, okay, you now report to them, and they report to them, and your group has also been reformatted, and you're all doing this now. You were building widget A, you're now building widget B. And we hope that your skills transfer. Good luck. Now you find yourself in a situation where you didn't hire into this group. You didn't interview these people. You don't know these people. You have to somehow operate there, but you're, again, that type B personality. Is this a group full of type A's? Is it a group full of type B's? Is there a balance? How exactly do I fit here? So the first thing you got to do is you got to learn the organization. So you're going to interview your new manager. Talk to them about what's important to you. Don't be afraid to represent clearly what it is you want for yourself. I have a lot of discussions with people where I say, well, what do you want for your career? What do you want out of this? Some people are real clear, and they're like, well, I'm really just here to make money because I'm actually an artist, and I do sculpture in all my free time. And that's totally fine. That is a fine answer. You need to understand, everybody's afraid to say that. And I'm like, it can't possibly be that 100% of the people who are working for me all want to do just that. That's what they want to do. They just want to write code, building mobile apps. That's all they want to do. That's their life. That's not true. I don't believe that. And so if all of them come to me and say, oh, I just want to work. That's my career. I just want to do this job and keep doing it and do it better. No, you don't. Many of them are artists. Many of them are farmers. I got people who live out in Woodinville, and they're building organic farms and doing all sorts of crazy stuff with agriculture. And this is something they enjoy doing. It doesn't mean you suck at your job. I'm not going to assume if you say, yeah, I'm actually a sheep farmer in my off time, but I like doing this too. I'm not going to assume that, well, okay, you're going to suck at this because you want to do sheep farming. I'm going to assume you may actually be even better. You may have a better sense of time balance because of your need to balance the needs of your sheep with the needs of this group. May actually be better. Having that holistic view is a helpful thing for me as a hiring manager or as just a managing manager to understand about you. So interviewing with the manager, being clear about your goals, but also being clear about your goals then sideways. So the other thing that I see a lot is people don't manage up. Is anyone who is not familiar with the term managing up? Okay, so everybody knows you got to manage. You got to manage your manager. Make sure that they understand, that you're fully on board and you know what's going on. They tend not to manage sideways. Your manager's peers will probably be equally important when it comes time to supporting you. Not just at review time, but just in general, the things that you need to get done. If you're working on a project and you need help from other folks within the group, having that sideways view of folks who you don't report to, they don't necessarily have direct impact on your group, but that will actually have some dependency that you have to come at later, representing to them again how you work, what your philosophy is, what your needs are, will help them then calibrate against you. So otherwise what happens is you end up with people who will make assumptions about you. Oh, well, you're like everybody else. I assume you're a type A, right? We're all go-getters. We're all here to make things happen, right? I'm going to assume you're going to be here 12 hours a day if I need you to be. Well, I'm not. Actually, I coach my kids' softball team, and so every Monday and Wednesday I'm gone at 4 o'clock because I got softball to coach, which I actually do. I coach my kids' softball team. So being clear with that representation to other people will help your status within the group so that you don't have people then talking, because people talk. People aren't going to talk about you as that guy who's always gone at 4 o'clock. Why is he gone? We got things to do. Versus you had lunch with them, you had a coffee with them, and you talked about your kids' softball. Yeah, my kid's got a great softball team and we've been doing this, and every Monday and Wednesday I'm out doing that. Oh, okay, now I get it. That clear communication with folks who aren't just in your direct line of report is very helpful across the organization. It can also be a case within people that report to you if you're a manager. One of the things that I find, though, is that the type A's are not so big on forgiveness and patience. So you've heard the term ask for forgiveness, don't ask for permission. Some folks aren't so forgiving. So if you're a type B and you think, I'm just going to sort of let this slide, we'll work it out, it's cool, we're all chill here, and sort of we'll slide through things. And because we're all reasonable people, we'll talk and we'll work things out later if it doesn't go quite right. We'll find out the hard way that a type A person who was managing that did not expect that you were going to do it that way. They expected everything was going to be tight, ordered, worked out up front. Any things that were critical were going to be communicated very quickly. There wasn't going to be some after the fact, well, okay, we'll kind of clean up the mess afterwards. That's entirely unlike a type A personality to want to expect. So this notion of, if you think to yourself, well, I'm going to work that out, this is why you have to communicate with them and understand where they're coming from, so they also understand where you're coming from. That communication, even in the difficult relationships, there have been people with whom I violently disagreed on how we should do things. We could still work through the problems because we understood where each other was standing in terms of our philosophies. They understood that the way that I'm going to work through these problems is going to be slower. It's probably going to be more collaborative. It's going to involve more compromise versus something that is more command-oriented, where it's top-down. We're going to just figure out what's going to happen, and we're going to tell everybody, and we're going to make it happen and go, go, go. At least having that communication allowed us to talk. Whereas if you don't have that, if you haven't communicated with them and you don't have that relationship, you're just going to do this. And they're going to just go, I don't understand why you operate this way. And you're going to go, I don't understand why you operate this way. This sucks. So it's an unpleasant sort of thing. So as you have that sort of relationship, you can talk to people and think, well, okay, are there compromises available here? How can I work with you in the way that you work to work with the way I work, to compromise and find something that will let us both succeed and both get something out of this deal? The final thing you can do is to try and change the culture. So this, of course, is the hardest piece, and it's the piece that I both like and dislike the most. I confess I enjoy being a stick in the mud. I like complaining. I like being the one who points things out and says, that sucks. I don't want to do that. That's a horrible way to do this. Can we fix this? Now, obviously, you don't just come out and you should probably present it in a somewhat more politic way, but there is a tendency among many folks to accept an organization as it is and to say, that's just the way it is. I'm just going to work under this. And don't. I can tell you, as someone who's managed several large organizations, people who come and say, the way that we're doing this is crap. This doesn't make any sense. We're wildly inefficient. We're creating tons of bugs. The design isn't what it could have been. We're 3 months behind. Here, and it's all because of the way that we're approaching these problems. How about we take a different tack on this? That sort of willingness to be fully blunt about things that seem imperfect is hugely valuable. And yet, type B personalities, who tend to be more relaxed and chill and less confrontational and don't want to be the ones who come up and say, I want to change things, they don't. They sort of sit back and they take it. So the thing that you got to remember is, if you're a type B personality, if you're the more relaxed, non-confrontational, non-aggressive type, is have conversations. You don't go to someone and say necessarily, this sucks, I hate this, I don't want to do it. It's not that kind of complaint. That's not a valid way of doing it. The way to do it is just simply have a conversation and ask questions. Think about the Socratic method. I found that this seemed like, I didn't quite understand this. Can you explain why this is happening? Can you explain to me why we do this way? I don't understand why this seems to be going wrong, and yet we have a process. Can you talk to me more about why it is like that? The questioning methodology leaves it non-confrontational. You don't have to go in and have a big blow up with somebody. You're just having a conversation. Have a coffee. Ask some questions. Gives you that in with them that is both non-confrontational and increases your personal relationship with them. By not having a sort of direct conversation where you're saying, I want to do X and I need you to do Y, but you're just asking the questions, they become a mentor to you, right? So regardless of what their personality type is, they become a mentor, and it puts them into a position of helping you, while at the same time you're trying to help the whole team move forward. So listening carefully, communicating, asking questions is a hugely successful way of taking a less confrontational approach to making change in the organization. And ultimately, you can get to a point where if you're doing that on a consistent basis, the culture changes. Other people do that. You say, well, I had this conversation with so-and-so. So then that person comes in and has another conversation with a parallel person. Over time, that becomes a habit. We say, well, this is sort of how we do it. We sort of have these conversations and we work through things, as opposed to we have confrontations and we have direct blow-ups with people that are very hard to manage. So that's probably if there's one takeaway of all of these, I would say it's that technique for type Bs in a type A org, is that communication aspect. So let me sort of tie this all up. We're sort of at the end. So I'll tie this up and we can take some questions. Issue one is being honest with yourself. Have you actually done a clear assessment and said, I really know what I want out of this. I really understand my goals. I understand my limits. I understand my, where are the barriers for me? And I'm able to represent those to others. Researching then where you're going. Know the company, know the manager, talk to people. People are willing, again, donuts and coffee are a great way to get information. A lot of people are willing to do that. LinkedIn is a perfectly viable way. I've gotten any number of cold calls from people who said, you're you're linked in through so-and-so that I know, we have this common person, or you're even 2 steps away, but you know about X, you're part of this company or whatever. Can I get you a coffee and just ask you a few questions? 15 minutes of your time. Sure. Okay, go downstairs, knock yourself out. It's a little weird. It's uncomfortable for some folks to talk to someone you've never met. It will be hugely valuable to you later, that research. And ultimately, at the point where you've gotten into the organization and you've done this communication, try and change the culture. As a type B personality, we are in a society that massively values type A. The aggressive, combative, competitive personality is the one that is wildly valued throughout the society. It is glorified. We are not all that. And your org will be far more successful if you have a diversity of thought. So to the extent that you, as a type B personality, or someone who even just leans that way, and if you are type A personality, by the way, you should be listening to this as a informational for you to figure out how to react to the type B personalities that are coming to you. That diversity of thought is significantly more able to produce good outcomes in terms of creativity, in terms of endurance, so that the entire group can actually continue, not putting people on death marches, and ultimately happiness across the board. The success, if your success for your group is that everyone there is happy and working well, and thus producing good work at the outcome, having that diversity of thought, acknowledging the different personality types will be hugely beneficial to you. Communicating is probably the first piece of that.